Okay, I believe that we are live. So hello everyone and welcome. Whether you are on Zoom or whether you are on the American Mussar page or the Jewish Live page, thank you so much for joining us. If you are on the Facebook channel and you are watching live, you might want to hit the Zoom ID if you want to participate. If you want to just watch, that is fine too. This is the first week of our renamed program. It had been the weekly American Mussar community gathering. Now it is Jewish Wisdom for Coping with a Pandemic. The theme is still the same. We're going to be using guidance from the Jewish spiritual practice of Mussar to help give us skills in order to cope with where we are today. Today we're going to be focusing on the soul trait of gratitude, which in Hebrew is hakarot hatov, or recognizing the good. But first, as we always do, we're going to begin with a short meditation to help us become present. So please take a moment and get comfortable in your chair. Close your eyes and take in a deep breath through the nose and hold. And exhale through the mouth and hold. And again, inhale through the nose and hold. And exhale through the mouth and hold. And as you go at your own pace of inhaling through the nose and holding, and exhaling through the mouth and holding, if thoughts should come into your head, just observe them and let them pass. Like watching a car pass on the road. Now is not the time for solving problems. Right now, all you need to do is inhale through the nose and hold, and exhale through the mouth and hold. And on your next inhale, say to yourself, Shema. And on the exhale, listen. Shema. Listen. In Shema, we're listening deeply, without judgment, without offering advice. In Shema, we're listening with an open heart. Shema, listen. And when you're ready, you may open your eyes. Well, friends, welcome. Whether this is your first time or whether you've been here every week or whether you have popped in and out, it is wonderful to see you here today. I am going to share some slides to help us with the conversation. Let's see, can everyone see the slides? Yep, okay, great. So as a recap, here is where we've been. We started on March 19th, just as a almost spontaneous coming together as we began. Things started to get really serious with the pandemic and we had to start sheltering in place. And then we started moving through different soul traits in my book, The Spiritual Practice of Good Actions. And as I wrote this week, the one that was up was gratitude. And that was as I think many people know, my mother passed away almost 2 weeks ago. And this wasn't a time when I was feeling like I wanted to practice gratitude. But my experience with Mussar is you practice what comes up and you see where it takes you. And as I wrote for those on the email list, I was able to find a number of things to be grateful for. My mom is not really the focus of today. And although I am very thankful for all of the wonderful support from many different communities, including this one. I wanted to start with our open conversation with maybe if you have a spiritual practice or some other practice that is helping sustain you through this time. I would love it if you would share that with the group. Just a few brief comments, but if you have something to share, please unmute yourself and start to share.
I do something that I don't know of anybody else who does in this area. I like to hang my sheets on the clothesline, and I find that gives me a real sense of centeredness, and I'm in nature, and I love the smell of the sheets that have come off the line, and I know that I'm working as slowly as my ancestors have. There's no hurry about it. And the sheets smell wonderful afterwards.
Wonderful. Thank you, Janet. Who else?
I do a gratitude journal, and I write 15 things that I can find to be grateful for that day. Sometimes it's the same thing day after day, but it's simple things like all my appliances still work. They're all, trust me, they're all very old. You know, keep in mind, they could break anytime, but they're all still working. Electricity. Today, this group will be that, one of those things. My people that shop for me, I'm grateful for them. Lots of things to be grateful for, even though in some ways things really suck.
Wonderful. Thank you, Carol. It was someone whose dryer broke about a week ago, and we had to have someone come in to fix it. It is very easy to take those little things for granted, but boy, when they're not there, we sure notice it.
Yeah, I'll just jump in and say, part of my spiritual service is, spiritual practice is to be of service. Greg, I feel like that may be part of your spiritual practice too, because you acknowledge having lost your mother so recently that that's just huge and profound. And the fact that you're here doing this and finding community and helping to build community, I just want to say that's a beautiful thing, and I hope that it brings a lot of satisfaction and fulfillment to you and to your life and family. So,
amen to that.
Thank you. And service to others sounds like that's part of your spiritual practice. That's always a wonderful, wonderful thing to do, and can certainly be very rewarding. Yeah. Yes, Uriela?
Uriela, hi, Greg. And a spiritual practice, I never thought was that, but I think it is. That early in the morning, I wake up fairly early, and already at 6:15, I do listening partnerships with people. I call someone and they listen to me for 5 minutes, and I listen to them for 5 minutes, and then we say goodbye. And there's no interruption, no advice or anything, just listen. And that's wonderful. Sometimes 3 times in the day, 3 times in the morning.
Oh, sacred listening. Nice. I love it. Thank you.
Nice. That was good.
Would anyone else care to share something?
Well, I've already shared, but I'd also like to share that I make sure if I can, I get out into the garden and get some sunshine every day. And I found a tape that somebody put out that's it's a bird watching meditation, and I think I'm going to use that.
Thank you.
So, I would love if you shared that, because one of the things I've been doing is getting up a little earlier, going out into the garden and just watching the birds in the fountain. There's a water fountain out there, and watching the finches and the hummingbirds, and it's just so pleasurable. It's a great way to start the day. It's just having so much fun back there, especially on hot days. So I would love that if you have a bird watching meditation.
It's very, very short. It's about 7 minutes. Who was that was talking?
It's Bonnie.
Okay. I'll have to find it and let me go find it and I'll post it. It's done by the British actor Martin Shaw, and his voice is just amazing. So
Okay, thank you, Carol. If you could post that would...
I'll find it and I'll post it in the chat.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Hello.
Yes.
Hi. My name is Yael. I just saw this and I turned on. So thank you for doing this. I guess my spiritual practice, as the gentleman said, is generally being of service. I'm a retired psychotherapist. I've been trying to volunteer, but with only a little bit success. But I right now, and it's been for a while, it's been gratitude, because every day I just focus on the things I'm grateful for. And, you know, even though it's not always easy to be on lockdown, it's I look at the things I do have rather than the things I don't have, and appreciate those things. And I also do a meditation every morning. First thing in the morning, I meditate for at least a half hour, and that's helpful. And walking, we walk, my husband and I walk 3 times a day, after breakfast, after lunch, and after dinner. And that feels like a spiritual practice to me, because it's not just about doing exercise, although that's important, but it's I look at the flowers, I take pictures of the flowers. I'm a person that loves nature, so the walking feels like a spiritual practice to me as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Maybe next week I'll ask the question, because I think if I ask this now, I'm going to take a chance. I'm going to get the question, but I don't want answers because we'll spend the whole time. But we could also talk about, like, what do we consider a spiritual practice? I mean, so many different things, but connecting with something higher, connecting with nature, connecting the inner world, outer world. And I love how so many of these things are small things, like folding the laundry, or it was making me think. I set up, I have a tiny little front porch, but there was enough room for a camping chair. And I posted a couple pictures, just, you know, and I would just sit there and think. It was like, I'd talk with people on the phone. And of course, there may be some radicals among us who do other things for spiritual practices, like praying or going to services. And of course, these can be wonderful spiritual practices as well, if that's your flavor. Maybe one more person, if someone would like. Otherwise, we can continue. Okay, then we will get back to the slides. As is our custom every week, we revisit the 4 assumptions for a Mussar practice. And the idea is that for people who have a different, people with different amounts of Jewish literacy, you don't need to learn like the whole, there's a lot to learn. But if you do these 4 assumptions, they kind of allow you to get started and engage with the practice. And the one that we're focusing on this week is that we all share the same soul traits, but have a unique measure of each. So we're going to see in a few minutes, for example, that when we look at gratitude, that there's a spectrum where some people have very little gratitude and other people may naturally have quite a bit. And at a time like this, we might find ourselves very challenged about things to feel grateful for, being stuck at home, having our lives disrupted, potentially our employment disrupted, other sorts of losses. But understanding that, we have that kind of capacity for coming and going and having more and less is really an important part of the picture. And it can also help us if we start judging another person, if we think like, this person doesn't seem to ever show gratitude, or this person seems to be very miserly. If we understand that they have that capability, I think it can help soften some of those judgments. I'm curious, if you look at this and you think about this assumption, what does that bring up for you? Does that give you, do you have any thoughts or insights to share about this idea that we all share these same soul traits?
I'll go if nobody else will.
Please.
I've often thought of the Mussar traits and Mussar texts and much like a toolbox. We all have the exact same toolbox. We all have the exact same tools. Tools used for a different purpose to work on a particular object, just like each one of the different midot of Mussar is used for different purposes, and we all have access to them in one way or another.
Yeah, thank you. And that's, you know, that was important for me to remember this week. It's like, really, I have to do gratitude? It's like, yeah, well, that tool's in there. Let's pull it out and let's see where it gets us. So let's delve into gratitude a little bit here. May I have a volunteer to read the slide, please? Maybe someone we haven't heard from yet. You could just unmute yourself and get rolling.
Mussar teaches that the gratitude soul trait governs our ability to recognize the good in any situation. In fact, the Hebrew word for this soul trait literally translates as recognizing the good.
Thank you, Linda. Let me pause you there. So what does that mean, recognizing the good? And this is for anyone to answer.
That it's a conscious awareness. It's something that doesn't pass over you without your recognizing, without your being aware of the goodness.
Yeah. Yeah, so we have to bring that goodness to the forefront.
I also think that, you know, people say everything happens for a reason. And it's hard to hear that sometimes when something bad has happened. But if you turn that around and find the lesson that can be learned in anything that happens and the good that can come out of a negative situation, that's important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good can come out of negative situations, absolutely. And that's sort of speaks to that second part, because it's recognize the good in any situation. And that's kind of a tall order, I think. Does anyone have a problem with that?
It's definitely a challenge, but I think there's an appreciation that can go with it if you can get to that point.
Thank you, Rob.
As a newspaper person, I have interviewed parents of children who have cancer. And one of them said to me quite assertively, there is nothing good to be learned from this. Quite firm about that.
Yeah, that's a tough one. It's hard to imagine any worse situation than a child with cancer.
Someone had said that things, you know, for whatever reason, things do happen for a reason, and I personally believe that wholeheartedly. And when we just to use the newspaper person's comment of the cancer, and I think, you know, the loss of a child is a parent's worst nightmare. But I think that it can take years sometimes to figure out and to understand what the positive is in that. And I don't think that we can expect anyone to figure that out in a day, but I think it is something that to have patience and understanding. I think that has to go, in my mind, that goes with it, and part of my process of gratitude and getting to a point where I am grateful at for anyway. So
Thank you, Anne.
There's a danger in saying that everything happens for a reason. The Holocaust?
Yeah.
Okay, so there is everything happens for a reason. It's a saying that many people say, and it is controversial, and it implies a certain theology that there is something that causes things to happen in a certain way. And for some people, they may subscribe to that theology. I'm not sure that I personally do. But what I do subscribe to is that in any situation or in many situations, there is something to be learned from it. There's something that positive can take place. But I do think it is, I certainly think we want to be careful. You know, I'm reminded of one of the rules for visiting someone during Shiva, or if they're in mourning, is, you know, you allow the person in mourning to initiate the conversation. And in some circumstances, bringing up the, you know, and I don't think, you know, Anne or the people who did this would go up to a grieving mother and say, well, everything happens for a reason. You know, that would be very callous. That would not be the time and place to say that, even if we subscribe to that. So I don't want to, I'd like to kind of move on to sort of the next point here. And who was reading?
I was Linda Wimmer.
Yeah, Linda, if you could please continue.
Surely. It is easy to get caught up in a litany of woe, listing all the injustices the universe has visited upon us. We lose sight of the fact that life itself is a gift. In fact, the terminally ill can seem to be more alive, filled with joy that they have survived to see another day. Mussar teaches us how to gain this appreciation while we remain alive and healthy. In the Talmud, Ben Zoma teaches, who is rich? He who is happy with his lot.
Thank you, Linda. Okay, so we've talked about in the first part sort of recognizing the good in any situation, or recognizing as good as possible in situations. And then what's the point of this second section? So I've got to let my cat in.
Well, Greg, I could probably attune to this.
Yes, go on.
Okay. So when I was 18, I was diagnosed with MS, multiple sclerosis. And my mother already at that time had been diagnosed with MS when she was in her 30s. And so by that time, she was already in a wheelchair. And so at 18, being given this possible, I'm going to be in a wheelchair, my life is over, kind of like that saying that, you know, you do start to look at life as a gift. And I think I was probably depressed for about 4 days. I'm very lucky that I am somebody that processes things very fast. And I thought to myself, you know, I could be hit by a bus tomorrow and be in a wheelchair. And so instead of imagining myself already there, I'm going to imagine myself healthy and be able to do everything that anybody can do plus more. And I always have been this person that does plus more. And I've often thought that my MS has been a gift because luckily for me, most people with MS are very tired. I'm the exact opposite. I'm the Energizer Bunny. So I tend to say, thank you, you know, universe, for giving me this altercation in my brain a little bit. And also, again, I don't have many lesions in my brain. I think I have 3, but I do have 3 lesions on my spine, which, you know, could be scary because I do not have a feeling around my waist and I have numb feet and stuff. But again, every day I wake up and I'm very grateful that a new day is starting and I can do whatever I want to. And, you know, my spiritual practice a lot of times is me creating and painting. And so, you know, like I said, I tend to be one of those people that if I do get sad, I say to myself, okay, we can go into this emotion. I have a choice to stay here, or I have a choice to be happy, because eventually I'm going to go back to being happy. So why not forget about all the sadness and go back to being happy? So that's me.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
It's a
Other
kind of
thoughts?
shift in thinking from being grateful for what you do have rather than dwelling on what you don't have.
Mm.
So it's more looking at the glasses half full. In the case of death, for example, or the loss of someone in your life, it's being grateful for the years you did have with that person and the joy that that person brought to your life when they were with you. And yes, it's a deep sadness. It certainly is, but it's just, I guess it's a little paradigm shift in your mind, just making that shift from sadness to gratitude.
Thank you, Bonnie.
This is Uriela. Is it okay to speak again?
Sure.
Something that I heard a long time ago stuck with me. It was that someone that I valued a lot and still do appreciate it in my life, even though he isn't around anymore. But he said something like, to have lived even for only a few minutes in the greatest agony it means you have been alive. I forget how he said it, but it is an amazing miracle that we are here, that the particular things that happen, there are many sperms swimming after an egg, and the fact that that came together and we are alive, that we got to be on this planet for as long or as little as we are, is a great gift to have life.
Yes.
The odds were very great against that.
And is that something that sustains you, sort of remembering that, you are here and you certainly didn't have to be. We got Huck, the spiritual kitty, who's been wandering around. We'll see if we can get him to settle down here a little bit. How about this teaching from Ben Zoma, who's one of my favorites in the Talmud, who's rich, one who is happy with their lot. Is that, anyone ever met a miserable rich person? Yeah, I've had more and less money in my life, and not having any or being very, very poor can be an issue, but it's a different access. Someone have maybe a personal experience of sort of feeling a richness and abundance, even if it wasn't in the form of material wealth.
I do. I have an example. I live in San Diego, and the janitor at the synagogue we used to belong to lived in Tijuana. And I don't know what we paid him, but I know he would have to drive back over the border, Tijuana, and then do that 5 to 6 times a week. But he always had a smile. He always had a joke. When we took, when our kids were young and they were going to the Hebrew school, and I know one got car sick, and as soon as he got out of the car, he threw up. The smile, he cleaned it up for us. It's like this, not Jewish, but just very, very, very content with a happy-go-lucky attitude, who is just grateful and happy, and is definitely left an impact on me as someone I try to emulate and fall short often.
Thank you, Rob. And that's so beautiful. And I think it's also an important, that is one of the things in the Mussar tool chest, is to sort of think of someone who we admire for a particular trait. And then when we're working on that trait, we can even sometimes meditate on that person or think about how that person would handle a situation. My grandfather was like that. He was graduated high school in 1932, and he'd say, Greg, I graduated in the heart of the Great Depression. I never got to go to college, but he never let that stop him from getting his education, and he was not bitter or angry about this. And he, so that really made a huge, huge impression on me, especially when I was younger and very ambitious and had all these things that I had to achieve in order to be happy. And he was this great counterexample for me. So let's talk about the spectrum of gratitude. So what's the danger if we have too little gratitude in our life? If we don't focus on gratitude?
Complain all the time. Nothing looks good.
Self-pity.
Nothing's ever good enough.
Nothing's good enough. Self-pity. Yeah, it's not.
Anxiety get out of control a lot of times.
What's that, Christo?
My depression and my anxiety often get the better of me if I don't have enough gratitude for what I have.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I also think it can be when people have a sense of entitlement.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
They deserve everything they get, and they don't know. Of course, I'm thinking of one person in particular, but I won't get political here. But they feel they deserve everything, and that they owe nothing, and just an ego gone wild, and it does not speak of spirituality or or any kind of humbleness, the spiritual path.
Yeah, and I'm also hearing a lack of connection to other people. Like, if you're not grateful for things, it is a symptom of maybe being a little too focused on the self, or it can be part of it. Absolutely.
Can give rise to some greediness and a lot of self-absorption.
Yeah. Now, gratitude, we've talked about what a wonderful thing it is, but too much gratitude can be an issue as well. What does that look like?
Well, no ambition.
No ambition, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe a lack of self-worth.
Lack of self-worth, okay. Yeah, even really someone's treating you like crap. It's like, oh, thank you so much. It's like, well, maybe that's not the best time to be grateful.
I also find it really uncomfortable if you help someone out and their thank you is like over the top and doesn't end. I don't know, maybe that's more about me, but, maybe you drop something off for them that they left at your house, and then all of a sudden they send you a bouquet of flowers. And
that's nice.
Yeah. So that's a wonderful example, Leslie. I hadn't thought of things that way, but absolutely, that can cause discomfort for other people. And, it makes me, like if I were finding myself out or practicing this, I'm like, I seem to be like really laying it on thick when somebody, the mail got delivered next door and they brought it over, and I went on and on about what a wonderful human being they were and what's going on inside of me that's making me act that way. There's something seems a little out of proportion, perhaps.
Well, I was thinking of the example giving. So she says, you bring the mail over, and next thing somebody's giving you a pot of flowers, and then you feel like, oh, now I have to do something back for that person. Does this person expect something? That can be kind of uncomfortable.
Yes.
But that's really more about you than them. They're doing what they need to do to feel good, and you have to take it as you can.
Right.
And that's where, you know, in this public forum, we don't always share as vulnerably as we might if we weren't on Facebook Live, but I think Anne's point is good. You know, we use these examples. The object is always to, once again, though, turn it inside and say, where am I sitting on the spectrum? Where might I, you know, need to grow and improve? So that's a good, very good reminder, Anne. So I think I'm going to move on. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I really do like this first one. Be not like those who honor their gods in prosperity and curse them in adversity. In pleasure or pain, give thanks. So
Does
maybe
this have anything to do with, to me, gratitude has a lot to do with staying in the present. And I'm wondering if this has anything to do with that. You know, if you're judging that somebody has caused you pain or that you have caused somebody great pleasure, either way, the result is what am I feeling, and am I feeling it right now, rather than to soak in it, so to speak. I don't know. I'm just wondering if this has anything to do with staying in the present.
Well, people, what do we think? Does this connect to staying in the present?
Yeah,
No.
just to be.
I'd say so. I was taught once many years ago that you're the only person that makes yourself happy. It's not anybody else's responsibility. And I think a lot of us look for people to make us feel good. And I think sometimes also people have a hard time when they do meet people who are happy or are exuding their gratitude, because they themselves are, you know, emoting a sense of, you know, sadness in their life. And so yeah, you know, I think being grateful for being alive is a really important thing, you know, and to thank every day, you know, the universe, source, whatever, that we're here.
I think it's also about being steady and not fickle, and that prosperity and adversity come and go in your life. They both come and go. But staying steady and being grateful and knowing this too shall pass, or things will change, because they always do, just gives you that stronger feet on the ground kind of true gratitude for who you are and what you have. And I think it just helps you get through.
Thank you, Bonnie. You know, there's no one right or wrong answer for any of these. And, you know, in general, most hours of practice of becoming present. It's easier to stay steady, as Bonnie says, if we're present. That may, or, you know, but that idea may not resonate with other people. And that is okay too. I want to...
I'm interested in one of the comments that was, I honestly do not believe that a person can feel too much gratitude. And I'm thinking the same kind of thing. I don't know if there can be too much gratitude.
I don't believe there can be too much gratitude. I think that when I heard the other conversations, people seemed to feel as though they had to question their feeling of gratitude if they were grateful for something that someone else might have not felt such gratitude for. I'm grateful. I feel gratitude about most everything good in our lives. And I don't want to examine my motives for feeling gratitude. I'm just grateful I feel it.
Yeah, I think that's a really important distinction. I mean, it is really important, and more often than not, like these are, this slide, it's a good segue to the slide because these are some of the things that prevent us from feeling gratitude. And I would say many times more gratitude is a good thing. We're just not grateful for our inanimate objects. You know, we take our shoes for granted. We take our house for granted. You know, or we take relationships for granted. But there are, you know, I guess I would wonder is if, you know, someone's in an abusive relationship and they're still feeling a lot of gratitude towards this person for staying in a relationship with them, you know, because they have very low self-esteem and they're feeling grateful towards their abuser. You know, is that, you know, that might be a circumstance where it's like, is gratitude the right, you know, a healthy thing to do? Or, you know, so that's.
I see your point in that example. I was not thinking of an abusive relationship.
But is that gratitude or is that codependency? That's.
I was just going to say the same thing, and a controlling behavior, and that's a common trait for an abuser to portray and get their victims to feel guilty and be thankful that they're in the situation that they are, that they've got a roof over their heads, etc. So I agree.
Yeah, no, it's a pathological condition, and it's someone who's been, you know, it's part of being abused, and I have to be careful because I'm running with scissors here. I'm not at all an expert in that area, but those feelings, you know, just to use an extreme example, are a case where we might have those feelings and they're out of place to the situation because of what I'm hearing the way the abuser sort of program them or set them up and, you know, played with their mind. But that's sort of an extreme example. So I think it's always, you know, or if you're given a bonus at work and, you know, it's great to be given a bonus, but if you feel like it's not commensurate with the work that you've done, I think sort of you know, gratitude without judgment or without discernment, you know, maybe that's kind of where the danger comes in, a sort of gratitude without discernment. And if we're not discerning our situation, we might feel a lack of gratitude, but the flip side could also be true.
Well, on the one hand, if you're talking about having a job, suppose you have a job and it's way under your abilities and you're not making too much money, but you're so grateful you have a job, and it kind of stops you from any kind of ambition to get a better one.
Yeah, thanks, Carol. I want to get us to our
I would like to share something.
Sure.
So one of the things I've been noticing in the recent years is that I still have awe, and I'm really grateful for that. And one of the things that this allowed us to notice, my wife and I, Linda, who's sitting with me, is we have crystals in the window, and it brings in rainbows.
Lovely.
And so again, but I notice it, and I feel like a child when I notice things. When I'm not walking, and I feel that it's I don't feel rich, but I feel grateful that I noticed those.
That's wonderful. That's a wonderful feeling.
Greg, it's Ken. Can I just share a couple of things quickly?
Certainly.
Okay, thank you. That was a beautiful point that was just brought up, by the way, about awe. I use the word a lot, or wonder, full of wonder. And part of that is, as a child, you have all this passion, and something happens as we grow older, perhaps, that might close that off, as opposed to seeing things through the eyes of a child or the heart of a child. And so when you mentioned that about the rainbows coming in and so on and so forth, and looking at it as the awe, still have a feeling of awe. It's wonderful. Couple quick things. One is there's some, one of the words that was not mentioned just now, and it should be, is forgiveness. When you were talking about that just now, I think it was apples and oranges, but forgiveness is an important concept to be put in here with gratitude also when you're talking about other people or other things. One thing I heard the other day that I think is so important is, be kind. We think of things in Mussar and so on, be kind towards others. But also it's important to be, especially going through a pandemic now as we're talking about Mussar and pandemic, be kind to yourself, be gentle with yourself. And I heard the other day, and I love this, be tender with yourself. That really helps. It really helps when you do that, when you think of meditation or when you think of exercise. And one thing that was not...
Thank you, Ken. You've brought up a couple of really good...
Just mention positive music. I think very helpful, period.
Positive music. Thank you. Some wonderful tools, some wonderful coping tools. So I'm going to open up the breakout rooms. The previous slide, it talked about like different categories of gratitude, like for things we take for granted or inanimate objects, or also trying to find the silver lining in challenging circumstances. And so we'll have about 5 minutes where each person can kind of check in, and maybe if you have some thoughts about gratitude, or is there a surprising gratitude? Where might you grow and find new things to be grateful for? So so the rooms are now all open. So just click join when that shows up on your screen. If you're still watching on Facebook Live, I am going to do what I call the extra teaching. I think everybody, no, not everyone's not there yet. Brad, Lisa, Edward, do you guys see the join breakout room on your screen?
I see it. I'm just not comfortable joining. Is that okay if I set out?
Oh, sure. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. What room were you in? Carol. I'm going to move Carol to a different room then.
I'm sorry.
No problem. No problem. Okay, let me see. Let me make sure everybody else has somebody in their rooms. Okay, Brad just joined his room. Okay, I think we are all good then. Excellent. So I am going to reshare my screen. I always have a little, for those watching on Facebook Live, we have a little extra teaching that I do, and some people go back and watch these after the fact. So here are 3 reasons why we maybe aren't feeling grateful. One of them is that we can become too absorbed in worldly things. One of the things I think that's so interesting about this pandemic is suddenly we don't go to the mall anymore. Like people who maybe found distraction in going shopping or getting the new iPhone or iPad, that can really, we've had an interrupt. It's what they call in the advertising world a pattern interrupt. And if you've been sort of focused on the worldly things and suddenly life has changed, we see something really different, okay? So the second reason why we might not be grateful is that we ignore the familiar and we take it for granted. Again, you know, just driving on the highway and seeing like different things. I mean, I get so little stimulation right now. I walk around the block, you know, going to the grocery store is, you know, on the one hand, I'm kind of happy to be out. On the other hand, it's a really stressful situation. And just, you know, I just took it for granted that I went to Safeway or Whole Foods or whatever. I wasn't grateful that I didn't have to wear a mask, or I didn't have to wash my hands, or I didn't have to kind of run away if somebody had a cough or a sniffle. I mean, this was just ordinary life, but boy, I miss it. And I think we all miss it. And so being able to be grateful for those things that we have today becomes really important. And then the third one, and this is another, you know, is a danger we have right now, is becoming preoccupied by the bad things. I know many people have started limiting how much news they're watching. They have, you know, and I've had to do that because these are tough times. And there's a lot of people who are suffering economically. There's a lot of people like myself who are experiencing a personal loss. There's also just loss of other stuff. You know, my daughter can't go visit her boyfriend who lives 2 miles away, and you know, she's missing high school, and my older daughter is missing college. And you know, taking teenagers and locking them at home with their parents, that is a serious bummer. But if we as adults allow ourselves to become preoccupied by the bad, we can't be grateful. And if I become preoccupied by the bad, then I'm setting a bad example for my kids. I have to try to enjoy what we have. Like, you know, so many people talked about earlier in the call, going outside in nature. I mean, I created a little Shiva spot for myself on this tiny little front porch we have. I put a camping chair out there, and it's just a beautiful spot. It's shady. I can watch the bees and the flowers, and it's just very peaceful there. And I don't want to leave that good thing unenjoyed. So that's pretty important to me. Okay, I believe, yeah, we're just up to, so that's kind of our extra bonus teaching. I am going to stop the share, and then I'm going to give people the 1 minute warning to start coming back. Hey, Carol, I saw you were asking for help. I'm sorry I wasn't in a position to kind of pop in. I hope you got it resolved. Hey, Bonnie, welcome back.
I didn't have a partner.
Huh. Oh dear, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Is
that because you had an odd number of people?
I did, oh shoot, I did know there was someone who didn't join your room, and I reassigned other people when that didn't happen, and I'm sorry, I just didn't see you. I should have assigned you to a different room, so
okay.
I apologize.
Okay.
If that happens again next time, just leave the room and come back to the main section.
Very
and
good.
I'll assign you to a new room. But I hope you had a nice meditation or something for those couple of minutes. So let's see, we're starting to get people coming back now. Ooh, I think we're just about done, I think. So I'm curious, would anyone like to raise their hand to share sort of some insight they had about themselves from their conversation? I always love to hear from people we haven't heard from yet today. Anyone is feeling courageous, sharing something? Wendy.
Okay, it's Leanie. Hi. Well, it wasn't just the conversation, but I'm just very aware that when I was in my 20s, I was so preoccupied with so many other things going on that I don't know that my level of awe and gratitude was as accessible as it is now. Because now that I have, I'm getting older. But the other thing that my partner was talking about, it's really, really hard until some time later, some years later sometime, to realize why things happened and, you know, what you're supposed to learn from them. That it can take a long time to step back from a situation.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, Wendy, did you want to share as well?
Sure. I met with Diane, and we kind of had a similar, we're kind of in a similar position as one another, in that we have family around us who can actually be uplifted by our bringing gratitude into their hearts. That's what that arrow is all about. Depression and complacency to me are the same thing. So she had an 85-year-old uncle, and then I have a former son-in-law that he doesn't have COVID, but he's very sick. So, but there's just the whole family dynamic where we're sort of in the middle, and now we have this tool to use to help others, which it's amazing, actually. And I thank you, Greg, because you actually brought that to mind to me when I read your email about your mom, and sorry. And when you were naming all the things that you were grateful for, I was seeing you turning the crystal, the prism, you know, so that it was for the different places of being grateful surrounding the situation, not the situation itself, but the gratefulness that you had for just the various things that surrounded it. So I think we can bring that to mind for other people if giving that. And that's what Diane, I think that's what we're going to do now.
Yeah, well, thank you. That's such a beautiful thought, and thank you for sharing that for people. I'm reminded, and people may be familiar with this. There's a famous quote from Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers, whose mother told him, in a disaster, always look for the helpers. You know, there are always helpers. And for us to have that opportunity to be the helpful, be the helper by modeling gratitude or feeling gratitude, you know, that's an opportunity, because that's also a really important part of spiritual practice, because there's a danger that we can get into almost a spiritual narcissism, that I'm going to work on myself because I'm going to make myself better and so great. But really the object is to work on ourselves so we can be better, so we can be in a better position to help others and be in a better position to serve others. And, you know, we work on ourselves for the sake of other people. So I think your example that you and Diane talked about is just such a beautiful framing of this, which I hadn't thought about. So thank you. Other people have something they'd like to share or add in our last couple minutes. Yes, Linda?
Those of us who have a tendency toward sadness, dialogues like this are really helpful to be reminded of the power of gratitude. So I'm grateful for things that people said tonight.
Thank you, Linda. I can't see everyone, so you don't have to raise your hand at this point if you'd like to add something else.
Well, I'd like to add one thing, and that was one thing that came up in our discussion was we're grateful for a sense of humor. Because if you can laugh if you can laugh at things that go wrong, or that things, see the silliness in things, it really helps a lot.
Great, thank you, Carol. I'm going to share my screen just one more time to give one more visual. This was from the Hidden Teaching. If you want to go back and watch it on Facebook or on YouTube, you can see where I was talking about reasons why we weren't grateful. But this is from the end of every chapter. I share some ideas because in this following week, I'd like to invite you to think about maybe one change or one practice that you're going to incorporate in terms of your own life. What's an action that you can take to practice gratitude? One thing is the 15-minute gratitude challenge. That's where you set a timer and you sit down for 15 minutes and you write everything that you're grateful for. You can do some gratitude journaling. Or you could write down some of the 3 worst things that ever happened to you and then maybe try to find some good that came out of each of them. That's a cheery one. Trying to bring gratitude to life situations instead of being impatient or frustrated. Something we talked about earlier is meditate on someone who personifies gratitude for you. Show people in your life more gratitude every day, just the people who you interact with. Or sometimes it can be helpful to practice another soul trait to help bring our gratitude into balance, like practicing humility. Judah and some others talked about, if we become too self-centered, then we're not going to be grateful, or we're not going to be noticing the people around us. And I'll post a link on my Facebook page to I wrote a blog post about the 15-minute gratitude challenge as well. So in closing, let us all once again close our eyes and take in a deep breath through the nose and hold, and exhale through the mouth and hold. And again, inhale through the nose and hold, and exhale through the mouth and hold. Now tilt your head back and open the jaw and smile. And allow yourself to experience genuine gratitude for this time of warmth and connection and understanding that we've experienced today. And extend the circle of gratitude to those people in our lives who are important to us. And finally, a reminder of the gift that this day itself is. And when you're ready, you may open your eyes. Thank you all so much for being here today. As is their custom, I will end the live in a couple of seconds, and I'll hang out if anyone wants to just talk or share any additional thoughts. Thank you if you've been on Facebook, thank you so much for being here. And please come back again next week, where we'll be looking at the soul trait of silence, I think it is, but I'll post that on the Facebook page. So once again, thank you. Okay. We will stop the recording.